everyone. Let's talk about getting and keeping the attention of your audience through a presentation. It is one thing to be able to stand up in front of a group of people and say information. It's one thing to be able to get up in front of a group of people and even just talk and tell a story. It is another thing to stand up and give information, to stand up and tell a story and actually keep the audience with you, keep their attention throughout what you're saying. So this really is, in my experience, the thing that separates a good speaker from a great speaker. You can have someone who knows their material, who knows what they're talking about, who has practiced, but if they don't know that they need to intentionally keep their audience's attention, then that expert, that person who might actually really know their material, that person who genuinely practiced and has good, clear organization and is easy to follow, can still lose the majority of their audience because they did not realize that they need to put some thought and some effort into this. And so that's what we're going to be exploring here. Okay, so before you watched this, you should have read The Science of Not Boring People, and you should have gone through your textbook and taken a look at least at Chapter 8, which is on audience analysis. I think it's Chapter 8. Ignore my chapter number there. The chapter on audience analysis, okay? Whichever chapter that is for the book that we're in. I have so many different books going. I have one book face-to-face, another book online, so I might be wrong, okay? But it's the chapter on audience analysis. And one of the things about audience analysis is you understand who it is that is in the chair or on the bench or whoever is listening to you. And you need to make sure that you have some idea of who that is. Now, sometimes you have limited information on who your audience is. Sometimes you really know who your audience is, okay? So let's talk about dealing with attention with audience analysis in mind, okay? So this is hopefully pushing you more into the better speaker category, okay? When you really are able to think this stuff through. So let's talk first about getting attention, okay? So you have to intentionally manage the attention of your audience, okay? Intentionally manage it. Don't just hope that your audience pays attention. That is leaving a lot up to chance. There are easy strategies you can utilize throughout any presentation to make sure that your audience is with you, okay? So I'm going to base some of this on just I mentioned a few of these things here priorly. Yeah, priorly is a word. In a prior screencast, okay? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to intentionally get the audience's attention, okay? So I have 3 things that you should do with an attention getter to make sure you get your audience's attention, okay? So these are very simple. Your attention getter must be effective, it must be relevant, and it must be appropriate. Now, if you'll remember, the speech template that I went through always has the attention getter first, okay? And you should do something to get your audience's attention. Now, contexts dictate what a good attention getter is or isn't. You know, if it's a very formal graduation speech, it's going to be slightly different than for what you're doing for your informative speech, okay? But it has to be all 3 of these things. So attention getters must be effective. They have to get attention in some form or fashion, okay? So let me just move over here so I can have this up. So consider this, okay? It's easy to get attention. Keeping it is difficult, okay? So while you're working on your attention getter, don't get hung up on, is this an effective attention getter? Most attention getters are effective, okay? It's the other 2 where we run into trouble. So now, you also need to be careful that when you're doing your effective attention getter, that you don't just do something easy to try to just chunk something in or chunk something out there. I'm going to get to that here in a minute. So your attention getter has to be effective. It has to get our attention. So one of the things we're going to be doing this week is we're discussing in the discussion boards what actually gets our attention, like what actually keeps my attention. And there are some things that people will do in a presentation that they think is a really good attention getter, but it doesn't exactly work. And so I'll talk about cliche, trite things here in a minute, okay? But you have to be effective, and then you also have to be relevant to what you're saying, okay? Um, you can't just throw a picture up of a cute kitten, and everyone goes, "Oh, look, it's a picture of a kitten," and then be like, "Okay, now that I've got your attention, let's talk about, stem cell research." Like, wait, what? What? The kitten had nothing to do with what you're talking about. So it has to be relevant, okay? It has to be relevant. And then it has to be appropriate, okay? So over the course of my career, I have had disaster attention getters. For example, I had a young man in one of my public speaking classes in my early career. I approved a speech on the effects of exercise on your body. Anymore, I probably wouldn't approve that speech without some serious input from me on it. But I was in my early career and I approved it. And for his attention getter, he walked up to the front of the classroom and he took his shirt off and he posed and like flexed. Now, to his credit, he was all cut up and he had been working out a whole bunch and stuff like that. But it's not appropriate to take your shirt off in a classroom. Okay? Was it effective? Yes. Was it relevant? Sadly, yes. Was it appropriate? No, it was not appropriate. Okay. And by the way, it didn't even really work. It was kind of slimy and not a cool thing to do because the first words out of his mouth were something along the lines of, "Ladies, do you like this? Guys, would you like to be this?" And we were all just like, "Oh, come on, man." And no one talked to him the rest of the semester after that. So it has to be effective, it has to be relevant, it has to be appropriate, okay? Now, getting attention is easier than keeping it. So do spend time on your attention getter, but also don't spend all your time on your attention getter and then forget about managing the attention later in the presentation, okay? Don't just get the attention at the beginning and hope that was good enough, all right? It's not enough. The best attention getters still need follow through later in the speech, okay? So getting it is easy, keeping it is difficult, and you probably have the attention hog friend who always has to be the center of attention. I mean, and they can get attention just by being like, hey, everybody look at me, everybody look at me, and everyone will look at them. But keeping it is difficult even for them. So consider this as well. Consider coming back to your attention getter in your final thought. Oh man, does this make you look well put together when you do this? When the first thing you do, you come back to at the very end of your presentation, it's such a good thing to do. Not only does it do something in the beginning and then wrap it up at the end, it sort of pays off the audience's attention, okay? They got your attention getter, and then they stayed tuned through the entire presentation. Then at the very end, you brought it back for them, and it's such a really great move to do. So consider doing that. Consider finding a way to use what you used in your attention getter in your final thought. It's a really cool tactic. Also, take the time to do it. So I'm saying, don't put all your time on it, but take the time to do it. Okay? You want to think this through. Don't just do something trite or cliche. Don't just be like, crap, I need an attention getter. I'm gonna go to a quotation website. I'm gonna just like look up my topic on the attention website. Oh, hey, there's one that'll work. And then you begin your speech with a quotation from a writer you don't even know, where you go, love and you shall be loved, Ralph Waldo Emerson. That's not a good attention getter, unless you're able to actually give a little bit of background, unless you're able to really draw us in with that quotation. Give us the context for that. Give us the context for why the author said it, in what work, and then how it's going to relate to what you're doing. Don't just do something cliche or try it. Don't ask a silly rhetorical question. It's just a question that's just there. Have you ever noticed the sky is blue? I have. That could be interesting if you're actually saying, hey, have you ever really taken a moment to look at the different colors in our sky during the day and wondered why it's blue and why it's a light blue and really where that's coming from? In my informative speech on, the atmosphere, I am going to explain to you how light hits water power. Whatever. I actually don't know why the sky's blue anymore. I think I used to know that, and now I don't. I need to go take a science class again. You know, how light hits water particles in our atmosphere, and those light rays come down and hit us, and it makes the sky look blue. It's actually not blue, right? Like, I mean, whatever. If I'm using bad information, I'm so sorry. But don't do the trite cliche thing. Take time to think about it. Work it out. Your audience will thank you for it, and you'll notice when you're up there, if you've got a good attention getter, you'll see it in your audience, or you should see it in your audience. Okay, unless you're buried behind a script or whatever. You should see it. You should see that it's working on some level. Okay. And then the last thing that I like my students to consider is do something that fits your personality. If you're someone who, I'm not asking someone who's introverted to stand up in front of the room and do something crazy. A crazy attention getter actually will put an audience off more than it'll actually go, hey, they stood on their head and sang Yankee Doodle. That was pretty cool. You know, they'll go, ugh. They so lack creativity that they stood on their head and they sang Yankee Doodle. Like, granted, people will talk about your presentation later, but it's not in the good way, okay? So do something that fits your personality. If your personality can tell a joke that is relevant, effective, and appropriate to what you're doing, tell that joke, okay? If you're not funny, don't tell jokes. Don't worry about that. You don't have to be funny, by the way, to be really good at public speaking. I mean, there are great public speakers who are not funny, and they know they're not funny, and so they don't try. And that's the way to do it, okay? So do something that fits your personality. If you are someone who has read every Fyodor Dostoevsky novel, and you love Dostoevsky, and you know there's a Dostoevsky quote that fits your topic, and you want to include that, then include that. That's not trite or cliche if it's a part of who you are, if it's really in your DNA, okay? But if you're someone who's like, I kind of need a quotation to start this thing, quotations about, saving the world, click. Oh, hey, turns out Dostoevsky has this quote that says, beauty will save the world, which, by the way, he does say that. But and then you throw it in there, but you have no idea where it's coming from. You just chunked it in there to fill a space. That's not going to work. It's not going to click, okay? So find something that fits your personality. Tell a story. Tell an anecdote. Cite a statistic if you're someone who's into statistics. If you're someone who really knows a lot about, I don't know, whatever you're into, find a way to incorporate that so that you're talking about something that you know that you're comfortable with, that's not just a placeholder at the beginning of a speech, okay? So whatever you like to do for fun, there's probably some way you can integrate that as a metaphor or an analogy or something like that, okay? Watch TED Talks. They're great at having these beginnings of their speeches that are effective, relevant, and appropriate to what's going on. And it's not, I've never seen someone at a TED event, be like, hey, everybody, I'm going to start my TED Talk now, and just catch themselves on fire and be like, okay, now that you're watching me, I've got about 60 seconds before I have to put myself out here. Like, that's not what they do. That's not what they do. They have well-crafted presentations. And so that's what I want you to do there, okay? So I'm already at about 13 and a half minutes here. I'm going to just stop and move to the next screencast where we will be talking about how to not just get attention, but keep it, okay? I'll see you in the next screencast.